Hey everybody, I'm Preet Banerjee. I'm the host of Spent, where every week I speak to Derrick Fung and we dive into some of the largest purchase panel data in North America to see how people are really spending their money. Derrick, welcome back to the show.
Hey Preet, how's it going?
Not too bad. This week we're going to be talking about Airbnb
Yeah.
because you and I, we both travel a lot. I don't know about you, but I kind of miss my homes away from home and the whole travel experience. How have you been faring, and have you been using hotels or Airbnb in the last little while?
Yeah, I've been. It's been an interesting year. Last year traveled 100,000 miles, and this year nowhere close. But definitely, I booked a staycation coming up, and so definitely have been itching to travel again. Albeit, don't know about hopping on a plane, but I got my car, and I think the whole staycation thing is pretty tempting right now. So and
It
easy
is,
and super easy to do.
yeah, and this is what a lot of people have been thinking, that, all right, people need to go out and do things. They're getting stir crazy. You can't necessarily go international. And so the idea of the staycation and finding a place nearby that you can have either a mini vacation may actually benefit some people in the hospitality industry. But let's take a look at what I think are some pretty eye-opening stats about Airbnb. So what we see here is that Airbnb sales are actually up 15.8% year over year. What the heck's going on, Derek?
Yeah, so that's not a it's not an error on the graph. It's true that Airbnb is actually up, and this is sales bookings, which is pretty nuts when you compare that to hotel bookings, which is still pretty, definitely down and kind of flatlining. So I definitely think
Yeah,
you're
here
right.
I have the chart
You
here
have the chart.
comparing Airbnb to hotels.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. So, I think it's a ton of people doing staycations, booking a week on an Airbnb versus hotel. And it's interesting because you'd think people would rather stay at brand name hotel chains because, maybe they feel like it's cleaner, but I guess they don't. And they're all, booking up Airbnbs and booking up long-term stays and doing a ton of staycations.
Yeah, initially I was thinking, yeah, hotels would be much more regulated in terms of the sanitation procedures that they would put into place. But then I realized you're working off a really low base because hotels are filthy, generally
Yeah,
speaking. Like, I mean, you go in and now the expectation is the remote control has to be in a baggie because that's how filthy they are. And
yeah,
whenever you see those shows that kind of do the undercover, let's take a black light to everything, it's disgusting, right?
yep,
And
yeah,
so now
yeah,
I'm starting to think, well, maybe Airbnb might be a little bit better. Now I'm
yeah,
tainted a little bit in that I once had an Airbnb experience where it was just the place was awful. Like, it was little hairs all over the place and whatnot. So that kind of, I think, anchored in my mind a little bit. But I think on average, when you
yeah,
take a look at it, people's homes, they're not used as much as hotels.
yeah.
Some people are more clean freaks. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
think more people would be amenable to, an Airbnb stay.
for sure. And
Um,
then there's also the in between, which we'll talk about a company called Sonder in a little bit, which gives you an Airbnb like experience with the amenities of a hotel and with the cleaning of a hotel. And I know we're going to be speaking about that a bit later on as well.
we are
Yeah.
indeed. And before we get there, let's look at one of the reasons that Airbnb has seen this increase. And this speaks to what we were chatting about, and that there is a shift towards longer stays. And
Yeah.
so on this chart, we see that the average order on
Yeah.
Airbnb has increased dramatically since COVID started. And so I think there's a couple of reasons for that. You have people who are, working from home, who can now work from, as they say, any home. And
Yeah.
so you may actually book something on Airbnb so that you can get work done
Yeah.
if you're not able to do that at home. We know that frontline healthcare workers need places to stay because they're exposed and they don't want to expose their families. And so they may stay in an Airbnb for an extended period of time to protect their loved ones. Um, but this is
Yeah.
really interesting because it's opening up opportunities as well.
Yeah, I think there's also just a ton of pent-up demand.
Mm.
Don't know about you, but haven't really left my place much. And now that economies are starting to open up, I do think people are just making the most of their vacation days and just taking longer stays. So I think it's all of those things combined, which, as you can see on this chart, has led to average booking of, let's call it 400 something bucks before, to now you'll see here 600
Yeah.
in May, and slightly lower in June. But it's been interesting to confirm some of those hypotheses around pent up demand, more staycations. When you look at this chart, these charts, these bar graphs, it's definitely validating all of the above.
Yeah, and people talk a lot about staycations. I don't know if there's as much buy-in as people would think. Yeah, it's always a great idea to explore your own backyard, but when you have these options of going to, like, Florence and the
Yeah.
south of France and whatnot, a lot of people will always end up doing that. But now you really have no choice. You can't really cross international borders very easily, and so that pent up demand, you want to do something, you want to travel, now is kind of like a forced excuse to explore your backyard. And I think people are doing that, and we're seeing that in the data. But you mentioned a company called Sonder, and I wanted to pull up this headline. So a staff writer at Forbes wrote this recently and said that there's this hospitality startup called Sonder, which has
Yeah.
actually raised money, $170 million at a $1.3 billion valuation
Yeah.
during COVID-19. So when someone sees a headline like this, you're probably thinking, is now the time you want to raise money if you're in the hospitality industry? But
Yeah.
there's a reason why Sonder was able to raise this money. So, and I know you know Sonder fairly well. Do you want to
Yeah.
explain what it is and why they're able to raise money?
Yeah, I mean, Sonder's a company that gives you an Airbnb-like experience where you're not staying at a hotel, but they do have a ton of amenities, which makes it feel like you're, in a hotel. So it's like like Airbnb Plus.
Hmm.
I'd say like another step up, even beyond that, where you've got concierge, hotel-like amenities and cleaning and all of that stuff. Actually, a Montreal-based company, so it's a Canadian company who's they've since relocated into Silicon Valley. But I think companies, they raise money when they can, and I think why they were able to raise money is, I assume that they actually saw bookings go up, and there's a big bet that after this crisis, yes, travel will take some time to get back to the normal, but there's going to be a big gaping hole that they can help plug, in which consumers may not want to go back to the traditional hotels again. Definitely not the boutique hotels where the cleaning might not be up to standard. So definitely, I think some of the larger hotel chains will get traffic again, but I think Sonder has a big opportunity, and Airbnb, both I think have an opportunity. And when you think about some of the biggest tech companies that were born, oftentimes they're born during these types of
Hmm.
recessionary periods when consumers are just open to trying new things, because their world has been just turned so upside down. And I think that's what this is with Sonder.
Yeah, and Sonder has been around for a couple of years. It's not brand new, and they've been operating fairly successfully. But what they've done recently is they've kind of pivoted to take advantage of an opportunity that has arisen because of COVID. And what they essentially do, correct me if I'm wrong, is they have negotiated these long-term deals with properties that have spaces that could be used for longer-term stays in general.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
during COVID, they've actually looked at a lot of, college dorms and said, listen, you've got a whole bunch of people not staying here right now. Why don't we strike a deal and we'll put people in there for 2, 3 weeks at a time? And so they've really been very nimble, and I think that's helped them
Yeah.
raise money.
Yeah.
Um,
And what they also do, which is very interesting and unique, is they actually buy the properties.
right.
So they're not actually leasing them. And when you also think about, why they've raised so much money. They actually need a lot of money to be able to buy properties. But when you look at the real estate market, another big opportunity for a company like Sonder with depressed real estate prices, in which they can, buy up more supply for cheap.
Yeah. So now I think the question is, part of the reason we're seeing an uptick is that certain states in the U.S. have opened up faster than others. Some didn't have the major lockdowns. I wonder if it's too soon. We're starting to see these crazy spikes in the number of cases reported in some places that people like to visit. So I don't know what's going to happen. We'll keep our eye on the data. What's the great thing about the panel data that you guys have access to is that you can look at it at any time. So
Yeah.
I think it's something that we're going to have to revisit, especially now. It looks like there's something that's going to happen in terms of more restrictions, more lockdowns in some of these states.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And also, the other interesting thing is if you look at the Cardify travel tracker, you'll see that car rentals spiked up, but now it's seeing a bit of a flatlining. So I
interesting.
wonder if some of the new cases and just economies slowing things down, slowing the opening down a little bit has affected that. But only time and the data will tell.
All right. Well, we'll be here to take a look at that data in the future to give people an update. Derrick, thanks as always for being on the show. We will see you next week.
See you, Preet.